Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Christine Collins. This is going to be a quickie, highly focused, no intro Webbie. So we are going to jump straight in. So you are here because you're an intuitive entrepreneur and because you understand that your content creation is really part of the vital lifeblood in your business. And it helps you to bring in new clients. It helps you to keep your existing clients engaged and coming back. And it does a lot of the heavy lifting in your marketing. You want this content to be inspired and crafty, maybe a little bit fresh and edgy, and certainly to be effective. So it'll be helpful today if you do have a specific service in mind that you offer, something that you would like to focus your content around. And it really doesn't matter whether you're just getting started with content creation or if you already have some in the works. So we're going to start off today by taking a look at your existing content creation process. So allow yourself to conjure up the details of what it looks like for you right now. The sticky parts, the logistics, the parts that feel heavy and maybe aren't satisfying, as well as the parts that are working well, are effective, are satisfying. And if you have a notebook handy, you can write this down in 2 columns, or you can just kind of think through it if you're not near pen and paper. But on one side, thinking about what feels satisfying and effective about your current content process. And on the other side, what feels heavy or ineffective, and maybe come up with like 2 or 3 for each category. You can always come back and add to this later. But just to give you an example, so let's say you really love creating videos, but you hate typing up a written blog. So you can put each of those things into a category. Or if you love interacting spontaneously in Facebook groups and having those little conversations, but you really find it a strain to come up with the theme day posts, then you can put each of those things down in their respective categories. So think through that. You can always add to this more later as we go. So let's talk about how we can make our content more effective, more crafty, more strategic. So in order to do that and to use our content to draw those people closer, those perfect clients, we need to make sure that our content language is connecting and engaging. So we can use some of the clever insights that have been gifted to us from those who have studied how the mind and the subconscious works. In order for us to truly meet our clients where they are, we need to speak their language. My guess is that you've been told at some point that you really need to speak to the problem that you solve. And that's absolutely true. But we do need to expand on that just a little bit, because the thing is that not all of your potential clients are going to choose to work with you purely to resolve pain or a problem. There will be some people who seek you out because they want to move towards something that they desire, something that feels good. In the hypnosis world, we understand that a portion of the population is what we would call away motivated, meaning that they are primarily motivated by a desire to avoid pain. And we all have this in us to some extent, but this is kind of like a spectrum that we all fall into. And it varies depending on the topic. It varies depending on our situation that we're in right now as a person. And it's going to depend on what's happening for us with that particular issue. So we have that group that is primarily focused on avoiding pain, but then there's another end of that spectrum who is more primarily toward motivated, which means that they're inspired to make choices that move them towards something that they really desire. So if you're only ever talking about the problem and speaking to the problem, you may be missing half or more of your potential clients that are in your audience. So again, this is a spectrum and it's fluid and dynamic. It changes. It's not something that person is always one way or the other. But we do need to make sure that we're talking to our audience that falls on both ends of that spectrum and in the middle. So to make this a little bit more tangible, and give you a couple of examples. It's the difference between talking exclusively about the pain points of a health issue or perhaps feeling unsatisfied with unwanted weight versus also including the excitement of maybe having brighter skin from drinking more water or healthier hair or fitting into old jeans again after a weight release. So there will be some people who are motivated to make that change purely to get away from something that's hurting them and feels really bad to them. But then there's going to be another group who's motivated towards the desirable aspects, kind of the shiny object of something that feels really delicious in it for them. And then you will have some people who need both. So whether you're talking about sharing an educational tip or you're talking about a promotional post, you want to make sure that your content is encompassing both groups and you're not leaving anybody out. You're really speaking that client's language to meet them wherever they are on that spectrum right now. And while we're talking about speaking their language, making sure that we're really including everybody, we also want to consider that there are differences in how people absorb the content that we share, how they make decisions about whether or not it's useful, whether or not they want to move closer to us and towards our work. And we want our content to be heavily client focused, really catered towards how they take in information. And we all do that so uniquely. Just to give you another example, we have some people who make decisions solely based on a feeling that they get within. It's like an internal logical process for them. And for those of us who are highly intuitive, we definitely get this, right? We may follow a gut instinct or follow our intuition and make a decision wholly within ourselves without ever consulting anything outside of us. When we talk about that end of the spectrum, people that are able to make a decision just within themselves have what we would call an internal decision-making process. And again, this is a spectrum. So we all shift into different positions along the spectrum at different times and for different topics. Then we have on the other end of that spectrum, we have the people who absolutely need to hear from others before they can make a call, before they can come to a decision or an opinion. They just have to be able to hear about other people's experiences to form a decision. So we could call them external decision makers. So that's the group that they've got to go to all the websites and read all the reviews, or maybe they need to talk to their best friend or their partner. And then we have a whole range in the middle there. And again, we all shift and slide along the spectrum at different times. There's no right or wrong. It's just a spectrum. And this group that we could classify as the external decision-making group, they're just not able to make a decision or make up their mind about your work, about your content, about you without some kind of social proof. They may need to be able to read reviews or to talk to a best friend or to hear from others before they can make a final decision. So to that end, it's very helpful to have a system for respectfully gathering and sharing client testimonials so that you can help to address the needs of external decision makers. Now, I know many of us work in areas that are kind of delicate, where privacy is very important and confidentiality. So if you do support people in an area like that, it really helps to have a process that you can devise that protects their privacy, but still allows for them to be able to share their story about their experience of working with you. So what I do for them is allow them to select an alternate name, an alternate first name, so that they can still remain anonymous. So you can think through what that might look like for you to have a process in place. Now, your audience is going to move over time, whether it's slowly or quickly, from that very first encounter with you and your work into a place where you've begun to educate them, where they're more familiar with you and what you do. And you have over time provided them with more and more interesting reasons that validate the importance of what you help with, until they finally move into a place where they can really visualize working with you and they can see the benefit of that. So the purpose of your content is to gently invite them on that journey over a span of time and to allow for your crafty strategic content to gently guide them on that path towards you, on that path towards making an informed decision about working with you. It's really just an invitation. And because they are moving towards you over a period of time, it's important for us to look at how quickly or how slowly that may happen for different people. So again, there are unique differences in how people come to that place. So we want to take a look at how much exposure someone really needs to have to you and your work in order for them to reach a place where they can make that informed decision and to come to a conclusion that you're really good at what you do, that you're trustworthy enough to work with, or maybe they're recommending someone that they care about to work with you, and whether it's worth the time and worth the money to do that. So if we look at the psychology behind this and how the subconscious works, we know that there's a spectrum of readiness. And it goes beyond simply having really compelling copy or really amazing content. Those things factor in as well. But the readiness of the audience is its own unique spectrum. So here's what we know about readiness. You're going to have a handful of audience members who will see your content just one time. It might be one video or one webinar or maybe one opt-in freebie. They have some experience of you in some way. And from that one exposure, they immediately feel convinced that you're competent, you're trustworthy, and you're desirable to work with. And it's a relatively small percentage of people that will have just that one interaction and come to that conclusion. So these people are on the end of the spectrum. These are the people who maybe realize on a Tuesday morning that they need a new toaster. They can look at a few options, and by dinner time that night, they have a new toaster plugged in and ready to go for Wednesday. But again, it's a small percentage who are going to be able to come to a decision in that way. And again, this is specific to their situation. It's specific to the topic that's relevant. Obviously, purchasing a toaster is a smaller commitment than working with a practitioner. And really, the much larger percentage of your audience needs to have time and repeated exposure to your work in order to build that sense of trust in your competence and reach that place of having the desire to work with you. So if you've ever had an out of the blue booking from someone that you didn't realize was following your work, maybe it was at a time when you weren't really promoting, you weren't in the middle of promoting something, and then this came through, then you've already seen this in action. In truth, the booking wasn't out of the blue. It's just that we didn't know about that person's journey that they were already on towards us. It came from someone who was watching your work over a period of time, and then they suddenly had a light bulb moment, or they came across a video or a blog or something in your content that just clinched that final decision for them. But it was a decision that was building for a long while in some cases. And that's why right now we need to bring up what I call the dirty little C word of consistency. Because the thing about being consistent is that it feels hard until we make it easy. And here's the reason that it feels hard. Because we don't always get instant gratification with our content. We don't always see an immediate outcome or benefit with it. Sometimes we're sharing content for a while with someone before they reach a place of making a decision to work with us. So we're not necessarily sharing content and then seeing an insta sale. So what happens is we don't get dopamine reinforcement. We're not getting a reward feeling from sharing that content over and over. And that can end up making it feel pointless because we're not seeing an insta result. So I would say that content marketing is the long game versus an instant reward. We're not going to get that dopamine reinforcement to push us forward. And so as a result, we may not feel like doing the content work. And often in my experience working with clients, that is the thing that falls off when we get really busy, when we start to feel overwhelmed, because it's not always clear immediately to us the benefit in it. So let's talk about this consistency spectrum, and we can break it down into 3 groups of people who will eventually work with you. So let's just focus solely on the people who will eventually work with you. These will become your future clients. In the first group, there's the toaster people. There's those who will interact just one time with your content and just know and will just be ready. In the second group, there are people who will interact frequently over a short span of time. So this might happen, for example, like in a challenge or some kind of like a 30-day period where you're doing something and they're interacting frequently with you or with your content over a short span. And then in the third group is the people who will interact consistently over a long span of time, maybe a year or more. So we want our content to reach and be relevant to all three of these groups. And so it's really important that when you're sharing your educational and your promotional content, that it's shared consistently, that you're consistently present and not having a 30-day or 2-month period where you're really, really visible and then you disappear for 6 months and you're not serving that second and third group. And in order to be consistent, you really need to have a content plan that feels sustainable and that works for you, because otherwise it begins to feel too overwhelming. We have to have something that feels easy for us, something that feels manageable, because that's when we start to fall off of a content plan, is when it starts to feel like it's too much. It has to be manageable over the long term. It has to feel easy enough to maintain. It's great to be ambitious, but if you can only do it for 2 months before you drop off, then you're not meeting the need of all of your audience and what your business needs from your content to work. Let's take a moment and just think about what that looks like for you. It's a great time for you to consider how you can make your content plan feel sustainable and easy. So the first bit is to consider the level of frequency that actually feels manageable. Now, I'm aware that there are a lot of opinions and recommendations out there about how frequently you need to post or you need to send out emails. But all of those wonderful suggestions are pretty meaningless if you can't keep it up in a sustainable way. So it's a great time to kind of like get real with yourself right now about what you can actually do without falling off after a couple of weeks. Everything here is just a suggestion. Everything that I put up is just a possibility that you have to customize for yourself. So just for the sake of us having an example, let's pretend that we're going to have a Facebook page, an email list, a newsletter, and that we'll participate in 3 Facebook groups every week. So yours can be different, more or less. You may have other types of social media. You may be on Instagram. So you can incorporate that into what this looks like for you. Choose something that feels sustainable to do week after week. So is that 1 time a week for an email list? Is it 1 time a day for your Facebook page? And what about your Facebook groups? And I always suggest that whatever you decide with Facebook groups, it's ideal if you can plan on being in any one group at least 3 days out of a week, especially if you plan to promote in any of them, so that you don't just go in and drop a promo and then that's the only thing you do that week. My rule for myself is if I'm going to promote in any group in any week, I will share something on at least 2 other days in that same group and obviously engage and interact with other people. And I do reevaluate every few months if those are still the right groups for me. So you can kind of decide what works well for you. And if we go back and look at that list that you made of what's satisfying versus heavy when it comes to your content creation, all of the different things that feel good or feel difficult, ask yourself, based on this level of commitment that we've agreed has to be sustainable in order to be consistent, what needs to change on that list in order for you to be able to hold to this level of consistency? Maybe you could pick one easy thing that you can change in that unsatisfying category. Maybe there's something really simple and small that you could change to make things feel easier to be more consistent. And then maybe there are some longer term changes that you can identify. You know, maybe it's not something that's in the budget right now or something that's within your resources right now, but perhaps there's something long term that you would like to incorporate into your process. One easy example is, do you have specific time slated for content creation or content management somewhere in your business schedule? Whether that's 1 day a month, a couple of days per quarter, what does that look like for you? And how does it need to look in order to maintain consistency for your audience? So I'm going to offer a couple of possible planning ideas, but again, I'm never going to suggest a cookie cutter plan for anyone. When I work with clients one-on-one, we always customize a plan that works, that feels sustainable, and makes sense for your unique business needs. So everything that I offer up today can be adjusted to suit your needs. This is just a way to help you kind of strategize what you share and where so that it doesn't always feel like a last minute scramble for you to share your content. So starting off with Facebook groups, I know that one thing that has helped me a lot, that has helped my clients a lot, is notating recurring themes. Something about the things that are happening every week in the groups that you've decided you want to be a part of. So you can take note of repeating content requirements like tip days or promo days or personal share days. That way, when you are devising your content for the month or however you're doing it, you can meet those themes while simultaneously creating content that also works well for your Facebook page, your website, your newsletter. And that way you'll save a lot of time and prevent yourself from having to create separate content for everything. There's no need to do that. And those little personal share days, those little personal stories and about me shares, they can be repurposed also onto your Facebook page, your website, your newsletters. So you're creating content that will fit across all platforms, which will save you a ton of time. And make sure you allow a little bit of time in your groups to comment on other people's posts and really engage and interact with other people and not just go in and drop a post and then leave. Your interactions will lead you to deeper conversations with other people in that group. They will show other people your willingness to be helpful. It'll show your personality, and you just never know where those conversations in groups may lead to. Not just to the person that you commented to, but to everybody else who's seeing it, who's scrolling through and reading those comments. You can recycle tips so that you have a different tip for each week of the month, and then you can rotate them across your different groups. It really allows you to have fresh content in every space where you're showing up. It's really better to reduce the amount of groups you're in and have fewer bits of content that you're sharing than to try to stretch yourself so thin, but keep sharing the same work everywhere, because a lot of people are in a lot of the same groups. Now, obviously, we know that Facebook groups have those themes and the rules that we need to follow. But as we move into talking about your Facebook page, your other social media, your website, your newsletter, all of the other spaces that you have a little bit more say over, we can kind of loosen up and have some fun with this. You can start to get a little bit more creative in those spaces. You can mix and match different types of content, even in the same post, so that it doesn't feel so formulaic. It doesn't have to be, hey, here's a tip, here's a promo, here's a question. But I will say it does help to have recurring themes. So I like to have what I call a flexible plan, something that I can follow when I'm feeling tired or I'm extra busy, but I can depart from it whenever I get a creative download or an urge to share something new. You can do different combinations of those basic categories of content: promotional, educational, fun. You can play with it. You can mix and match. So you could ask a question and then move into a promo, or you can share a story and then mention your website at the bottom, or you can do an educational tip with a brief promo at the bottom of that. So for example, you could say something like, hey, if this tip really helped you and you like my style, we might be a great fit to work together. If you'd like to learn more, you can go here. Really simple, and creates a little bit of diversity in your content so that it doesn't feel like it's falling into these really formulaic patterns. And you can make your content really geared towards your audience, really making sure that everything you're sharing is something for them. It's either intended to engage them, to educate them, to give them something in some way. So if you're sharing about yourself, if you've got like a cute or a funny story and the idea behind it is to engage them and get some funny comments back, that's fantastic. Just making sure that it doesn't turn into a one-sided conversation, and always giving the most awesome content to your email list, really making them feel special, giving them something different than everybody else is getting. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but I have at times followed people that I was really excited about. And so I would follow them everywhere. I would follow their YouTube, and then I'd find them on Facebook and subscribe to their email list. And it would be so disappointing whenever I would get the exact same thing in every location after I've either been a paying client or I've given them my email address, because those people are like your VIPs and they should be getting something a little bit better than the people who are following you just on broadcast that aren't in your email list. And also just keeping the client's journey in mind, because some of them are finding you for the very first time, while others are at the stage of their journey where they're trying to imagine what you're like to work with. And then still others are just along for the ride. They're just there for the fun, and they maybe will never work with you. So kind of setting out to have fun with it. And the fun that you're having with your content is going to shine through to your audience, because they can absolutely tell whether you're enjoying what you're putting out for them or not. And since we've been talking about keeping it sustainable, you'll be relieved to know that we don't have to create brand new content every day. So in the interest of saving your time as well as your sanity, let's spend a little time just talking about repurposing, because it really, really helps you to not only save your time, but save your sanity if you can come up with some basic things that really work well for you. So I always recommend starting out with the content type that you are the best at. So that could be recording a video, that could be writing a blog or doing a podcast. And once you have that, more can be made from that one thing. So using the example of starting with video, just knowing that you can also do this in the reverse. So you can also do it by starting off writing a blog and then using that to guide your bullet points for your video and your podcast. So starting off with a video. So you record the video first. I usually like to batch record. That's what works for me. It may not be what works for you, and that's okay. For me, I find that I gear up for the energy of getting on camera. And I also like to make sure that my house is quiet, that I have the right lighting. So find how that works best for you. And as you're recording, it can be helpful if you either record several short videos that are different, or if you do a longer one and then you're happy to crop that up. If you feel comfortable with video editing, then that's another easy way to do it. But something that is both educational and promotional, so either a separate promo and a separate educational, or one long video that has both in it that you can then dice it up. So once you have your video or videos, you can get written transcripts of those videos relatively cheap or even free. So I use Temi, but there are also other platforms, some that are more expensive, some that are less expensive. Otter.ai I've heard really good things about, and from what I understand is free up to a certain amount. And then there's also Rev, so you can kind of explore those different options for you. But once you have that transcript, that text copy, you can then take it and snip it out into paragraphs for blogs, or clever quotes for memes, or some shorter little bits of text for your Facebook posts, your tip days, and your social media. And then you can reuse it very easily by making slight variations to it. So for each of those different bits, every time you create a variation on the same post, and you continue to recycle it for as long as it's relevant. You do want to review your content every so often to make sure that what you're putting out there still makes sense for whatever you're offering, for the work that you're doing today, because of course it evolves over time. But you can repurpose with each variation. So you now have multiple pieces of content that you can use over and over. And I always recommend putting a little bit of text with any video or audio to introduce it so that your audience can decide whether or not to listen. And it helps to know too that some people are highly visual and they simply have to be able to see the text. They won't be able to internalize the information from a video or audio. So it really helps if you have a variety in the types of content that you offer, and that you offer the same content in different versions to accommodate those needs in your audience. So now you can mix and match. You can get creative. You can splice up different things. You can use a tip video with a little bit of a promotion about how your services support that issue that you're talking about in the tip. You can take your promo videos and put them up on your website Work With Me page, or record a specific video about working with you, because that is so much more engaging for someone who is trying to decide whether they're going to enjoy talking to you and working with you versus just having flat text on your Work With Me page. You can use your tip videos on your Facebook page, in your newsletter, on your about pages, on your website, and of course, the tip days and Facebook groups. So you can mix these different things together and see how creative you can be. And then at the end of it, you always want to make sure that you're adding all of that work that you've done into some kind of a library, something that you can continue to recycle through, something that you can dip into for your tip days, or if you're just answering a question on Facebook or an email or your future blogs. And there's a lot of different ways that you can organize it. My very first content library, I think I might have started out just emailing things to myself. And then eventually I moved to Excel and Trello and Asana. I mean, there's so many different tools, many of which are completely free in order to help you kind of store and organize that content. So we've covered a lot of details today, and we've looked at some ways to make your content creation more engaging for your clients, but also easier for you. And now it helps to take a little step back and just assess everything. Let's assess how effective your content is. So does the content that you are using, is it doing its job? Is it strategic and pointing to your services? Meaning it's not just there to be there. It has a purpose. It informs, it educates, it entices, and it invites. Is it crafty and client focused? So has it been created with an understanding of your client's language, of your client's needs, and their journey on that path towards you? Is it consistent for your audience? So is there some way in which you're regularly showing up and keeping that presence for them? And is it inspired and it feels easy? You want it to be inspiring to your audience and sustainable, manageable for you. You don't want to be doing it just to kind of get it done, and then the energy behind it doesn't feel aligned. And that can be felt by your audience if it's just getting cranked out without any purpose. So if we can be more effective and purposeful with our content, we can do less in some of the other places and ease up in maybe not having to answer 50 emails a day or post in 15 different Facebook groups or jump around from idea to idea. If you can be more consistent and have that content really doing its job, warming up and converting your audience, how much easier would everything else in your business feel? So if these aren't all quite a solid yes, don't worry. Just imagine what it would be like, though, to have a content plan that does feel easy and fun and does its job. So I'm going to zoom out just for a moment to offer you that bigger picture of a content creation process that I call my magical content system. This is what I use to support my clients. These are the big picture concepts that I use to help clients get to that magical trifecta of strategic, inspired, and easy. So we have the idea conjuring, which is a brainstorming process, but it also involves clearing the path to getting the juicy ideas, stimulating the creative mind, using hypnosis and other tools. Hypnosis is such an incredibly powerful tool in terms of helping our minds relax enough to get the exciting, innovative ideas, while at the same time clearing out the self-doubt and the overwhelmment and all of those distractions, because the energy and the mindset is so much of our success. And then once we have that clear slate, then we can step into marketing strategy. And I use a process called reverse imagineering to help us to really create a customized, sustainable plan, not a cookie cutter plan that's rigid or impossible to follow, walking through that client's beautiful journey, starting at the end from where they're ready to book in and moving all the steps backwards to what you need to do in the here and now to make that possible for your client. And as we've already talked about, it's so important that we're consistent with sharing our content. So we know we need to have a plan that keeps the momentum going and feels really easy. So as you think about all those things that you wrote down earlier, the ones that feel heavy or hard or ineffective, and if you're feeling like maybe you need a little bit of magical support to kind of tackle that list to make sure that your content really is doing its job, then it might be worth considering, what if there was somebody there to help you to extract the juicy ideas, to pull them together strategically and figure out a sustainable plan so that your content can be more consistent and more effective. And those are exactly the things that we do in my magical content creation sessions. It's a really powerful session. We get a lot done. We conjure the content. We craft something that's inspired and strategic and easy, a plan that works for you, that's customized for you. We talk about your client's journey and the type of content you need in order to meet that journey. And then you also get to keep a professionally created hypnosis recording that is set to binaural delta wave music to clear the clutter, to stimulate the creative juices, to allow in those cutting edge ideas. And that really helps you to set up a success mindset. And that way you have that tool. You can repeat this magical practice of hypnosis on your own without me as you go on to create more content. Because I really believe in giving you the tools to make this process sustainable so you can keep doing it on your own and be consistent with it. And what we'll do is have it set up for you to receive that in advance. And that way you can listen to it right before we meet. So I recommend slating about 20 minutes to listen to your hypnosis, to get everything cleared out and get you in an uplifted state so that when we get together, we can jump right into the content creation and the strategy session. And I know we covered a lot today. So I hope that you have gotten a lot of value from it. Take a moment and pat yourself on the back for doing this today for yourself and for your business. It's really been my pleasure to bring this to you, to walk alongside you on the journey today. And I hope that we can connect really soon. And I hope that you have an absolutely magical and creative rest of your day.